Giulietta, thank you so much for chatting with us. I think the first thing that would be really valuable to talk about would be just to ask the question for all the practitioners that are watching. Why do we sometimes struggle to get results for our clients when it comes to managing these cravings that, despite our best efforts, are just still there and just still such a problem? Like, why do you think this is?
I think, I mean, there's a lot here to unpick, but I think one of the main things is that cravings are complicated in a way, and they have lots of different causes. And obviously, we go in with our nutritional therapy sort of goggles on, which is, of course, it's a wonderful way to support it. But I think also it's like the mindset that we have as practitioners around it is like it's something to be fixed, to be solved, to be like, our success would be when a client no longer has cravings. And I actually don't believe that's the approach that's going to lead us to any form of actual success. I think it's like helping our clients work with the cravings, understand them. I'm really very much about this sort of the premise that cravings are actually there to tell us things, and if we can, instead of like quash them or go even harder on the blood sugar balancing or higher protein, it's almost like, well, what is this telling us? And always bearing in mind that sometimes it's nothing to do with the nutrition. We have to step back and be more holistic and be like, well, what else is going on in this person's life? Because maybe there is an emotional component. Maybe they're feeling unfulfilled, maybe they're bored, maybe there's so many other things going on that I feel, of course, doing the foundations of nutrition is great, but the cravings are still there. What else is going on? And it can feel maybe like it's a little bit out of our remit. I get that, some of us might be like, oh, well, that's not really my thing. And that's okay, because we can also suggest that they get support elsewhere. But I don't think we need to shy away from all the different causes of cravings and how it's always not necessarily just the food thing. And also really being very honest with ourselves about how we feel about them. How do we manage our cravings, as nutritional therapists? Because, like how do we handle that PMS craving for chocolate? Do we feel guilty? Do we have all these issues ourselves? Maybe this is something that we also need to work through. So I think one of the issues why we don't always get the results we're looking for is because we're probably chasing the wrong goal, and we're sort of trying, is your goal for your client never to have a craving again? Because that's just not realistic, like especially with endo clients, for example, all the challenges they're facing, the emotional challenges, everything else. Are we leaning into that? Are we allowing some space for this to be witnessed? Because quite often what I've seen is like, it's where we're suppressing things, the body's like showing us these really weird kind of cravings for, maybe it's more love, maybe it's we're not feeling seen or heard in the endo journey, for example. We've had loads of really sort of like difficult conversations with employers, with doctors that don't validate us, and that can show itself up in cravings, just because our brains know, for example, some chocolate's going to release dopamine, we're going to feel a little bit better, we're going to get that serotonin hit. So I think going back to that question, cravings have lots of different causes, and nutrition is just one of the ways to handle it. And we kind of create some space to allow for the craving to speak to us and tell us, or tell our clients, what's going on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it kind of leads us really nicely onto the next part, which is like, as most of us are nutritional therapists in this space, like, why don't we just unpick for a minute what we do and we do get right and what is useful, and then what perhaps we could do that's often really missing. And I think you've already mentioned, clearly working on blood sugar, working on meal composition. What do you see people really hammering home on that you think, okay, well, that's really useful? And then what do you wish other practitioners might be doing that possibly they haven't tried yet?
So I think definitely the blood sugar balancing kind of approach is like the foundation, right? Because we all know if that blood sugar is balanced, you're less likely to want to kind of get yourself out of those slumps and up to those highs, etc. But I think it's really really playing in with everybody's unique biochemistry as well,
Mm-hmm.
even with that, you know, because we all have different set points for all of these things. So what works for one client isn't going to work for someone else. Some people need loads more fiber, some
Mm-hmm.
people need loads more protein, more fat. So individualizing even the blood sugar kind of approach, I think, is important. Of course, we start with the basics, and then, you know, we listen out for clues that the clients are telling us where maybe it's not working. You know, one of the things I love to sort of set my clients as a challenge, and also really helps them start to befriend their bodies a bit more, is like, what kind of breakfast do you need to eat so that you feel full from breakfast to lunch, right? And that looks different for everyone, you know, and it's sort of like some people need 4 eggs, some people only need 1, you know, other people, they do better on a more kind of like yogurty, fruity things. And it's really about starting to empower them with it, understanding how balanced blood sugar feels for them. So I feel that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, also really, really hammering home the protein thing. And I think most of us these days, you know, there's so many conversations about protein, and I
Yeah,
think
for
there's a
sure.
lot of awareness. So those are the things that I think work well as the foundation, but it's not the only thing. Then it's like, you know, noticing, like I've said already, how we feel about cravings, but also the language that our clients use about cravings. They're so loaded emotionally, you know. There's all these like, oh, I've been bad, I'm being good.
Mm.
And again, it sometimes can feel a little bit out of our remit, you know, like, oh, is that more kind of maybe therapy or whatever. But I feel we can go there quite
Sure.
confidently sometimes, you
I
know,
agree
and
completely, yeah.
just challenge it, you know, and just be like, okay, well, you know, you said this word, even the words we use ourselves, you know, because I feel we can go down that route sometimes as well. But I think really noticing the emotions that come with the cravings and how the client feels, and challenging that. One of the techniques that I love the most is giving them free rein to give into the craving. It's like, okay, next time it hits, first of all, describe it in full detail, you know, because a lot of it is just to do with the fact that we suppress. And we're, you know, we're not allowed to voice. It's almost like there's this shame. So I love walking my clients through this exercise. It's like, first of all, I get them to record a voice note sometimes, or whatever, you know, a message, and then they'll send it to me later. I'm like, give it full rein. Tell me exactly what you're craving, you know, like, I don't know, the dirtiest, most sort of greasiest burger from whatever. And I'm like, do it. And just don't stop. That can be really, really liberating. And then I'm like, okay, we'll see how you feel. And after that, if you still want to do it, go and buy it and enjoy it, you know, and like describe what it's making you feel, because that's a huge one, you know, like, what's it giving you? Like, it's really interesting when you do this with clients, because, you know, sometimes they'll be like, oh, I just feel this warmth and it feels like a hug. And it's like, okay, interesting, you know. And once you can sort of like dig a bit more, it might be like, well, what other things can make you feel like this, you know? And it's not to say, you know, oh yes, a celery juice will make me feel like that. We know that's an absolute load of rubbish, right? But it's like, well, where else can we bring in these feelings in your life? Or maybe it's that once a month, just before you bleed, you just need that kind of, that sensation of being hugged by a greasy burger, and that's okay, you know. So I love doing that. And the other thing that I really love to hammer home is cravings contain wisdom. They always, it's your body telling you something. Sometimes it's quite hard to work out what it is, and that's okay. But noticing it and going, okay, so what's my body trying to tell me? You know, I love giving my clients also like sheets with like what common cravings mean, you know, like it always blows everybody's mind. And I'm like, oh, salt and vinegar crisps. Well, maybe your adrenals need a bit of love. And they're like, oh, you know, like this kind of it. And it makes it quite fun. And it doesn't mean that that's always the case, but just saying, okay, so what's this craving telling me? What does my body want just now? And understanding that, you know, like the sort of like the food processing industry has hijacked that in a way, you know, and the craving for really ultra processed stuff may be a craving for calcium. It may be a craving for iron, but it's kind of got lost along the way, you know, and always like really noticing when there's a lot of blame and a lot of, oh, it's my fault, the willpower picture as
Ah, the
well.
willpower, yeah. And this is so important
Rubbish.
because, you know, like just as you're saying, when we restrict, especially for endo clients, that there's so much blame already, self-blame, self-criticism, and the restriction of life, quality of life, and possible physical capabilities perhaps at the time. When we then restrict food as well in a really rigid way, and as you know, and everybody knows, I really, really don't agree with that approach for endo. It becomes so damaging, right? To just do that without that understanding. And so it's really interesting to me what you're proposing is like taking the emotional side out of it and looking at the logistics of the craving and the why and the get to know it, rather than just go, cry, that food is going to kill me, it's going to cause me so much pain, and I'm a terrible person for wanting it. So I think that's super powerful.
It really, I mean, I think for me, that was the real kind of like pivotal moment. I did a course on shame, which had nothing to do with nutrition, but one of the co-hosts or co-leaders of the course was really specialized in cravings and women's relationship with food and the shame we feel about food. And it was exploring that really made me realize, because he was brilliant. He was like, coaching people on these calls, going, lean into it more and more, and you can just see resistance dissolving and relationships with ourselves evolving and changing. And like, I want people to actively look forward to their cravings. I'm like, come on, bring it on, like, let's see what happens next time. And there will be times when it is, I completely agree with you, that kind of rigid approach just doesn't work. There will be times when it is a question of like a massive chocolate bar. I've been there, like every couple of months, there's a day when I'm like, oh, and I'm like, okay, I really, really, I do all the work. I'm like,
Yeah.
is it this? No, it's not. It's this. And I just sit there and I enjoy it. And then I'm like, I'm done. That's it. Move on, next.
Rather than letting it rule the next week of how you feel emotionally and physically. And like I'm always saying to my girls, if the stress is so enormous around what you're putting in your mouth anyway, then it almost kind of negates what you're eating, because your enteric nervous system's just gone into meltdown about any food. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
that
yeah.
around it. So I think that's really important. And I wanted to ask you as well, if you don't mind sharing with us, we would really like to know if you could give one absolutely golden nugget piece of wisdom from all your quite extensive work on cravings, particularly in the female life, and coaching people and providing so much knowledge. If you had to pick the one sort of practitioner winning nugget that might really help the people that are watching the video, could you give us one that you think is really special that we can use?
I really think it's a concept of wisdom. Like, it's wisdom. Your body is trying to communicate with you. Can you listen? And can you pause and just see what your body is trying to say? And like I said, it's not about working out the perfect answer. There is no perfect answer, but to notice that moment when you feel it and you're like, oh, and you're like, push, willpower, I must push it away. Can you go like, huh, okay, hi, like.
Yeah, so going refamiliarizing, like getting acquainted with it, because I guess we just don't. We try
No.
not to listen.
We try not, I mean, all the literature, all the language around cravings is about how bad they are and how they have to be suppressed and how we have to control them. And all of that is exhausting for the brain. It's just exhausting. It just makes the craving worse, because the craving generally is about needing more energy or about needing a certain nutrient. So all of that just makes it worse and worse and worse. So it's that reframe of, this is my body trying to speak to me. There's nothing wrong with me, but it needs something. What does it need? And if you do that every time, you become much more literate in your body's own language, and you start to understand a bit more. And I think the other little bit I would add on is like using the menstrual cycle to help you work with your cravings, because every month we get a really good opportunity to do some work on our cravings, that late luteal phase, which is often really heightened with endo sort of clients as well, right? So can you use that as a pivotal moment to coach your clients? Can you use that to coach yourself? Do you have them? Like, I love that messy part at the end of the cycle, because it's like, right, what am I going to learn now? What can I do now? And really, really, really use it as an opportunity to like really shake things up, and really challenge all this rubbish that we've internalized from social media and wellness gurus and fitness people and everything else. Like, can we start rebelling against that as well?
Thank you so much. It's really, really useful information. And for those watching, I'm going to include underneath this video all the different ways that you can connect with Guiletta and her work and her resources if you or your clients need a bit more information on this enormous, enormous topic.